difficulties. As you can see there, it's only 87%, so we do have some people on WebEx, so we've got them on the small computers that at least can see me and hear a lot of the stuff. I want to say thank you and welcome for coming. Those that have not signed in, please sign in up there for purposes. The minutes. And the first thing I have to do, because we have people on the WebEx, is I have to go through a roll call. So I'm going to call your names, just indicate whether you're here. John Swenson.
Here.
Hey, James Stewart.
Here.
Jeff Caters.
Here.
Brian Padani.
Here.
Josh Antoine.
Here.
Patrick Antonin. Lenny Austin.
Here.
Julie Brasted. Sherry Bukala. Tony Cavane. Dan Deno. Steve Feldman. Mayor Feldman by WebEx here.
I'm here.
All right, thank you. Chelsea Howell by WebEx. We're here on Brad Johnson.
Here.
Amanda Marquez Simila. James Mork. Robert Nelson.
Here.
Dave Oswald.
Here.
Eric Peterson.
Here.
Tim Sanders.
Here, Mayor Standard.
Okay. Scott Schulte. Todd Schweiger. John Stonkey. Ryan Weirkey.
Here.
Ryan West by WebEx.
Here.
You. And Charlie Thompson. Chief Thompson here? Apparently not.
Mr. Chair, I believe he is on his way.
Okay. We'll get to. The record should reflect that those that are attending by WebEx have submitted their addresses, so that will be part of the record for purposes of conducting a public meeting. Okay, thank you all for coming. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Attachment A has been handed out. Are there any additions, corrections, modifications to attachment A? Anyone wish to do that? Okay, hearing none. I'll exercise chair's prerogative and declare them to stand as typed. So moving on to item number 3, which is the treasurer's report, attachment B, Sheriff Stewart.
For you or in your attack. As of September 30th, thank you to Corey and his team. High-level overview. Total revenue for the quarter is $1,523,025. Total administrative support expenses are $241,158. Total systems and maintenance support is at $906,564, leaving our total operational expenditures at $1,218,381, leaving our balance at $304,644, and our current estimated fund balance is $1,060,160. Additional material containers.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. Any questions for the sheriff? Because obviously we are under some budget, so appreciate any questions. Okay, as this is a financial matter, I would entertain a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
Mayor Phil makes that motion.
Okay, we have motion by the mayor and second by the mayor. Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Well, no, I gotta do the roll call again because we have a WebEx. According to the law, John Swenson. Yes or no? Yes. James Stewart? Jeff Caters?
Yes.
Ryan Padani?
Yes.
Okay, Josh Antoine?
Yes.
Okay, Lenny Austin?
Yes.
Steve Feldman?
Yep.
Chelsea Howell has joined the call.
Just Chelsea Howell?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Brad Johnson?
Yes.
Amanda Marquez Simila? That's a yes. James Mork? Robert Nelson?
Yes.
Dave Oswald? Peterson?
Yes.
Tim Saunders?
Yes.
Scott Schulte? Todd Schweiger?
Yes.
John Stonkey?
Yes.
Ryan Weirkey?
Yes.
Ryan West?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion does pass. Thank you, Sheriff. Let's move on then to item number 4, which are committee reports. We will start with the Governance Committee, Public Safety Data System, Chief Caters, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Governance Committee meeting met, our committee met October 12th. And a full draft of that agenda is available on the PSDS Base Camp website. If you have questions, George and I can send you that link out to the membership. Talked about a few items of interest, project status. It's been stagnant for 3 years with our software vendor, and George will work on closing out that project with Central Square on the software side of things. The SDS manager Jensen will talk about the staff changes in his presentation today or update. New business, we spent a majority of time on new business, which was some concerns that were raised about the current language in the public safety levy. As most of the membership knows, that was enacted into Minnesota statutes, I believe, like 10 years ago. Is that right?
That is correct.
And set to expire in 2023. So there's some timeliness with that issue. The concern was that the levy as it's written impact Anoka County's certified levy. So understanding the timeliness of that issue related to the legislative actions, we put together an ad hoc committee of members that were there that day, and there were 22 people at the governance committee meeting. So we set up an ad hoc committee, and I believe that group has a report attached to the JLEC meeting. Is that right?
And that is correct. Attachment G is what the ad hoc committee came up with and will be addressed later on in the meeting, Chief.
Okay, perfect. And then the last item that we talked about was the lifespan of some of our software and equipment. And that item will be added for the January 2023 governance committee. So just to update this group, we're looking at a lifespan 7 to 10 years for our software. Fire is currently going through an RFP process. Is that right, George?
That is correct.
Okay. Law is at 9 years, CAD is at 8, and ticketing module is at 9 years. So it's getting towards the end of the life cycle for that software. So time to start looking at different things, and we'll address that in January. That is all I have for the report.
Thank you, Chief Caters. Any questions of Chief Caters about the governance? Anything at all? No action item there, so we'll move on to 4B, which is the PSDS Manager's Report. Attachment C in your materials. George Jensen, go ahead.
So you read through the PSDS update. The big thing there is Britta Maddox, who was our law RMS admin, is now our fire RMS admin. She left us back in February to try some things out at Washington County. It didn't quite work out very well for her, so she came back with Jason's resignation. Jason got an offer from Polaris and accepted that offer. And right around the last meeting there, so Britta applied for it. Was happy to have her back. With the new fire RMS coming in, she's the perfect person, right time, right place for us to have her back with her training expertise and her project management expertise. So really happy to have her back. We did talk a little bit about the application stuff, and really it's what we're doing with that isn't going out to buy new software. What we're doing is going out to kick the tires on new software, just to see what's out there compared to what we already have. And that's what we'll start talking about in 2023. I just wanted to clarify that point. And then other than that, just working the system for you.
Okay. Any questions of George or of attachment C in the update? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, George. We can move on. Strangely enough, we have no contracts on for 3C, so we can move around to D, which is the Standards Committee. Captain Youngquist from Anoka PD is tied up this afternoon. He's actually helping to do a seminar for the Honolulu PD on the lethality assessment protocol that is in place here in Anoka County. It has gained not only regional, some fame regionally, but also nationally. And they are asking our people. So in the county attorney's office right now, there is a WebEx going on with Honolulu PD to let them know how successful or how we've done it here within Anoka County. So Captain Youngquist has been there. In his place, Chief Eric Peterson, I believe you will give the report.
There's only one item, actions. Specific item, and that is Britta Maddox side working standards guides. Coaching Fire Protection Council. It's the only thing they.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any questions? Chief Peterson on that one? All right, thank you, Chief. Let's move along. Item E, which is the Emergency Communications Committee, Sheriff Stewart, attachment D.
Our committee met on August 2nd. Some of the discussed were dispatch. Brought in some key takeaways from that were technology, and some of the applicable policies, and we're in the process of researching standardized best practices. We also got personnel updates and SAP building updates from. We were discussing the new 988 suicide and crisis lifeline. With many areas related to safety and beyond, but and statewide health community dispatchers. Other than that, our next meeting is December 13th. Additional information.
All right, thank you. Sheriff, any questions of the sheriff on that one? Oh, if you can, just for this group, you would recap the new 800 suicide hotline. Sheriff, could you expand that just a bit? So I think it's information others would want.
The 988 is similar to the 911 system without any plan. The goal behind it was on a statewide basis, they're going to roll out this 988 so that if somebody's feeling suicidal or in crisis, that they could call that number and it would go to PSAPs around the state of Minnesota, similar to 911. What they haven't given a lot of thought to is that regionally, not everyone has resources available. Not everyone has even people they can call out, and there's not even a standardized method of how that system rolls to PSAPs. So the concept was great. However, they kind of forgot to build a foundation underneath that concept. And so there's a lot of those bugs that are being worked out through ECN, and they've attached some new staff members that are currently traveling around the state trying to meet with people and trying to backfill some best practices.
Is there an estimated rollout date, Sheriff? Do you know? Okay. Anybody know? Purposes? Cities may get questions about this or the county. Okay. Thank you, Sheriff. Appreciate it. Do I need to speak up?
Everybody needs to speak up when they speak.
So we gotta project just like we're on stage. You got it. Okay, are in court and slow down. Was told many times. All right, let's move to item 4F, which is the Emergency Communications Department. D, Guthman, I think, is here to, are you gonna give that report at this point? Because Val is not here.
So the same thing. Areas. Exciting, we are staff. Also, we are down almost every department. We did just have 4 people start on the 2. The county is full of some things.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Okay. Sure, heard about that little issue in Ramsey County yesterday with the, any feedback about that? Okay, what we're talking about is they were supposed to, is everyone aware of what we're talking about here? 911 was supposed to target. Fortunately, went a lot broader than they thought. The good news, they caught the guy because it went broader. Bad news is you had to get a lot of people panicked. Did we? Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Let's move along. Item G, and this is a temporary committee. It's called the Critical Infrastructure Protection Committee. Chief Austin, I believe you're the chair. Attachment F, we don't have that.
We might have to wait until the system is ready so we can.
Well, Chief, I understand you have a,
I have a paper copy. I can still report on it. I
Okay.
can send a slide deck out to the committee.
They actually all have it.
Oh, they do? Okay.
It went with
Okay,
the,
great. So I can just.
Chief, Why don't you go ahead and take over?
Without the text, so, so just an update on our subcommittee, so just to take everybody back, we've been working on this for almost a year now. Having some preliminary conversations as far as some things that we should look at doing based on some of the events that unfolded in May of 2020 in Minneapolis and then also in Brooklyn Center in April of 2021. And the main part that obviously that we were all concerned with was the protection of our public safety buildings, given what happened out at Third Precinct and then also with what happened in Brooklyn Center. And the biggest reason for that is, and to keep in mind, is by taking some proactive steps well in advance, getting some of these things in place, it will allow us, both law enforcement as well as fire, to hopefully have a better response in the event we have civil unrest in any of our communities. A couple things with the law enforcement response. The one thing to keep in mind that I think sometimes gets lost with what they found out in the Brooklyn Center event was the tool, the de-escalation tool that the fencing demonstrated. Once that layer of non-scalable fencing was put up, the officers that were in place to the skirmish lines that were in place to protect the police department, they were able to pull a lot of those resources back. And hopefully, and I'm guessing that because of being able to do that, two things happen. One, from a psychological standpoint, the officers didn't have to deal with some of that one-on-one interaction with the protesters as well as the folks that were there wanting to do harm. But also, just from a physical standpoint, I know there was both in Minneapolis as well as in St. Paul, there were projectiles thrown at the officers. So being able to pull everybody back on that was a big help, and that's one of those indirect things that sometimes we forget. That's also important when we have these conversations about that. The other thing to keep in mind too, by doing something like putting together some barriers for our infrastructure, it allows all of our law enforcement people to respond to the areas that are going to be pretty hot in the event of civil unrest. Specifically, we're talking about things like business districts or some residential areas, depending on the type of civil unrest that we're dealing with. One of the things I had in there was a map of Minneapolis where with all of the damage that occurred back in 2020, it was pretty significant. When that was happening, we were fairly fortunate. We did have some damage, I know, down in Columbia Heights, and I also know Northtown got hit. But you can only imagine if a mall like Northtown would have been completely damaged to the point where they had to either rebuild or do a significant remodel. We're talking, probably $60-70 million to bring that Northtown Mall back up to where it is today. So again, other things to think about when we're talking about protecting our municipal buildings. One of the things that we did these last, I think it was last month, is we actually were able to meet with, do a WebEx with ARX Fencing. So ARX Fencing, there are a couple of fencing companies out there that kind of specialize in this type of fencing, but ARX is one company that has been used quite a bit in the metro these last couple of years. One thing that when we get into the numbers on this, one thing to keep in mind, we have not done any purchasing research on this for any of these products. And and these numbers are very preliminary. It's just based on some linear footage that we put together. And just keep in mind that if we were to move forward with a project like this, this would require some kind of formal purchasing process. So just keep that in mind. So we're a little ways out on it. So are we looking like we're maybe gonna be able to move on it?
Might have to give her some time.
All right, I'll keep talking. So
And then we'll ask some questions as well. So one of the things that we did learn with ARX is what we thought was very interesting is many of their customers are now they're going beyond assisting government entities. There are a lot of private sector people that are looking at also doing things with critical infrastructure protection, specifically with fencing. I know one of the companies that they mentioned, for example, was Apple. Because of some of the things that they have seen unfold throughout the U.S. the last few years, a lot of these companies are also being proactive and getting into this type of pre-planning when it comes to protection. So when we met with ARX, we looked at two different scenarios with their fencing. We looked at a standby leasing or renting option, and then also a purchasing option. And the numbers that the estimates that that they gave us was based on the cost of $275 per linear foot. And again, these are preliminary numbers. A lot of this is going to depend on steel costs and those types of things. But at least it gives everyone a little bit of an idea of how much we're talking about as far as cost. So if we were to look at standby rental, and again, this is a rough estimate. We based the number on 4,300 linear feet. And we came up with that number basically. We looked at two of the larger footprints in Anoka County. I believe Fridley was one of them, and I believe the other one was the government center. And so we came up with that number of 4,300 feet would be enough to cover two of our bigger buildings. Based on that number, the monthly cost would be about $233,480 per month, and then that number would slowly go down after a few months. That's obviously quite a bit. That does include ARX staff coming to Anoka County to help with the deployment of that fencing, but it does not include an emergency response. So if this was a situation where we had to call people at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's definitely that's going to be a different set of costs compared to a pre-planned event like a high-profile trial or something like that. Then we looked at the purchase option, and again, we're talking about 4,300 linear feet of fencing, and also as well as 5 vehicle gates, and that cost figured out to be just over $1.2 million. And that number does not include storage. It does not include deployment needs like trucks, forklifts, that type of thing to load and unload. And it doesn't include other things that we would need with that, such as ongoing training of public works people who would have to be involved as well with the setup. And then also, if this was something where we did need to bring in some ARX people to help with some oversight on doing the setup, this number would not include that as well. So when we looked at those numbers, we are recommending, if this is something that we decide that it's, as a JLEC, that it's worth pursuing, we would recommend looking at purchasing of the fence versus the standby contract. And the reason for that is quite simple. It wouldn't take very long for us to go over that $1.2 million. And so, so it just seemed to make sense from a cost perspective to look at purchasing. Again, there would be other things that we'd have to look at. We'd have to look at where are we going to store this? How are we going to store it? I know working with Terry on this, he's got some pretty good ideas on ways to store this and deploy that would, I think, be very helpful in this. The other thing to keep in mind too, and I know we're going to get into the whole discussion about the public safety levy, but this is, I think, something that if we were to look at moving forward with, obviously this would be something that we would have to look at other funding streams, and I think this is obviously something that I think the public safety levy could be used for. The other thing that some other considerations I think we should also look at when we're talking about this. So if you look at some of the after action reports on the civil unrest, both here in the Twin Cities, but also in other parts of the US, the one thing that keeps coming up time and again is, quite frankly, our response to these events. Both during that initial flashpoint event, but then also the management of those next several days or potentially several weeks on into the recovery phase if we end up having a lot of damage in our city. And those after action reports, pretty much all of them have said this is an area that needs to continue to be focused on as far as from a training standpoint. And even the state of Minnesota's after action report on their response to the civil unrest in Minneapolis said the same thing. Minneapolis, too, if you read that AR, they really called out the city of Minneapolis on that there was absolutely no command and control those first 48, 72 hours. And I know in talking to Sheriff Stewart on that, I think he would concur. And this is something that, at least, I think most of us here, this is pretty new stuff to us, quite frankly. And so if this is something that the JLEC is looking at moving forward on, I think this additional training component as well is something we should maybe consider wrapping into this as well, not just the fencing, but also the training. And when I talk about the training, I'm not just talking about first responders. I'm talking about first responders all the way up to the command staff, all the way up to and including elected officials. Especially when we get into a situation where there's a lot of damage and there's a lot of challenges, elected officials are going to have to be involved with helping us get through this problem. And so I think this is, and there's a lot of very good training that FEMA provides and that type of thing, but there's also a lot of subject matter experts that are out there that I think we could learn a lot from as well, that could help hopefully maybe accelerate some of our learning curve here. So it's just something to consider as we continue talking about that. The other thing I would also mention, and I think this might be a good segue, Mr. Chairs. I think at this point, I would perhaps recommend everyone here in the room go back and talk with, have a larger discussion internally with everyone, the rest of your elected leaders, the rest of your command staff, and let's really decide, is this something we really want to move forward on, one, and two, what should this look like? For example, one of the things that we talked about initially was the protection of just mainly public safety centers, law enforcement facilities, but there are other possibilities here. One of the things that's fresh on everyone's mind, for example, is the protection of these large scale events like for example, the upcoming Grand Day Parade. These large municipal events are also some things that, again, the things that we're doing now and some of the conversations I know we've had with Chief Peterson, they're putting things in place that, quite frankly, I never even thought we'd ever have to have that conversation. But unfortunately, because of the world that we're living in now, we have to take a lot of additional contingencies into consideration. So I think these are some of the things that we need to think about before really moving forward as far as and really narrowing down what is it that we want to do here. And also, do we have the consensus as far as moving forward as a JLEC with a project like this. So with that, if anyone has any questions of either myself or any of the other subcommittee, I'd be more than happy to try to answer those.
Thank you, Chief. Terry, maybe I have a question for you. Is there any FEMA money or is there any grant money?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, there's always limited amounts. One thing that I just left a meeting with one of my federal counterparts, and we're talking about this very subject. And one of the reasons this is called Critical Infrastructure and Key Resources Committee is opens up the gateway when we talk about protecting assets either because of an incident or because we're planning for an event. They're very much interested in that, but the dollars are very low. But as DOJ grants and other grants, by us having a committee and framing it that way, it opened up possibilities. But the dollars we get for typically the grants in our region would barely cover, a tenth of the cost, and it would deplete our entire grant. So the answer is yes and no. It's just the dollars aren't there to do a whole project.
Chief, was that explored at all with the committee, with the subcommittee? Any funding sources other than the members here?
Mr. Chair, no, at this point, we've looked more just specifically at cost of fencing, and then also just had some early discussions on some of the training aspects of this topic.
Other questions, comments?
Mayor Feldman here. A question I have here is, as the state, the $5 million that was coming from the state that was not accepted or approved, I believe it was an election year that may have caused that, but their first quarter for 23 is estimated to be 4.3% higher in their budget, roughly about $299 million more. So is there a way we can check out that again after election and going into 23, that may be a source for money?
Mr. Chair, are they talking about that $5 million that they tried to push through for the Hennepin County Consortium?
Mayor Feldman, is that what you're asking about?
Well, I'm asking about that, or if there's other revenue there that could be used for the North Metro. I believe the way, in my opinion, the right way to go with this is having JLEC be in control, not joining the Hennepin County because it's too big. I have concerns about if there's multiple events that need to have fencing. It's limited to 4,300 square feet, and there's other costs that was mentioned about storage and public works and other costs that will be associated with buying the fence. But I'm looking at any other alternatives, whether it be grant or other monies besides that 5 million from the state, to check out a source there. Like I say again, I believe it was probably more not approved during election year, and I think 23 be hard for them to not approve something when their budgets are their budgets are increasing and revenues increasing in 23. So I would like to see maybe reach out and check to see if there's some revenue that could come to the North Metro area versus Hennepin County from the state.
Thank you, Mayor. Other Chief?
I do know that, yeah, so the $5 million bill that they were trying to push through, it came in at the last minute, so it died pretty quick, I think, too. As far as going into next year, I know that the Hennepin County Consortium is looking at doing it again. It's anybody's guess on whether or not it's going to go through. I'm not going to hold my breath, I guess, because I know there's a lot of other things to look at. As far as the funding source, I know in speaking with Terry, there's just not, at this point, there's just not a lot out there to fund something like that or something like this. The training part, maybe a little, but at the actual purchasing of things like fencing and that, I don't think there's a lot out there.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Terry, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, one of the other focus areas that we had, just so it's not lost in translation, and it's not, is the short-term, medium-term, long-term planning. There's things we might be able to do now, but there's things that we could prepare to do in the future, some near future, some distant future, and we didn't really touch funding. We knew it was going to come up, and that was a good discussion for elected officials and kind of looking at that. This is kind of the recommendation, is at least have it on our radar. It is. But what are we going to do about it? And then being able to work with, the chiefs and the elected officials to kind of figure out what is the stance, what's your city, what's the counties. But really, it's been here with us for a little while, and what is our next action? At least taking the steps, baby steps now, and then growing that as we can. But one of the things we couldn't tackle, because like we've discussed, is just the funding, and there's too many unknowns at the legislature. And then federal funding has been gradually going down for grants in particular. So it's one of the things the recommendation that cities at least look at it if you have a new building project, integrating some of those best practices. I mentioned my federal partner. They come in and do assessments and give some good recommendations. Secret Service and others recommends certain things that you can do for resistance to these types of events, best practices. So that's kind of where we started, and now we're just letting it grow and take its path, for each local jurisdiction. Storage, who's doing what, have yet to be determined. It's kind of the tip of the iceberg, but we're at least looking at the iceberg and knowing that we have a long way to go.
Other comments, questions by members? Yes, sure.
Just a comment on the training. Well, none of us could have predicted what the last 3 years looked like. I continue to be proud, continue to hear, as I'm sure most of you do, the Anoka County law enforcement contingent, the members of this room and our teams, stood out, shone brightly. We continue to hear that. So I think whilst 3 years ago, we didn't recognize the need for some of the critical incident response and management and mobile field force, et cetera. Since then, we've all worked together, we've all trained together. And when we were in Minneapolis, Brooklyn Center, Line 3, wherever else we've been scattered over the last 3 years, I continue to hear positive feedback about the professionalism and the seriousness of the training that was applied by the Anoka County law enforcement contingent. So if you're all not hearing it, know that it's out there because it made a difference and our teams continue to shine bright.
Thanks, Sheriff. Other comments, thoughts, anyone? In terms of process, Chief, do you have some recommendations? Are you recommending that this body, members of this body certainly go back and have those discussions with their respective city elected officials? And then schedule this for the next meeting or?
Mr. Chair, I think that's a good course of action. And then, and then with the chiefs here, we can email back and forth or talk further on this offline. But I do think revisiting this after some additional discussions with their elected leaders and internally, and then decide, all right, what do we want to do here? Do we want to move forward with this project or not?
I think an important point that you brought up, Chief, is it may not be used only for times of civil unrest, but there are other things. They parade, we almost only have parades. There's 17 parades in Anoka County every year. And I know, Chief, you took some extra precautions this year with the Halloween parade, didn't you?
Yeah.
Fencing like this probably could have come in handy.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I could just expound on that a little bit. Over the past couple of years, we've watched things happening around our country, specifically vehicle-borne attacks and attacks by individuals within large groups. And so what we've done over the past couple of years is harden our barriers, putting sand trucks, dump trucks, front-end loaders over streets that we had never done before. But this year, we decided that we would try our very best to flood the area with sworn officers as much as we possibly can. And Anoka County law enforcement is sending what they can with the little bit of people that they have. And so first I want to state that I appreciate that. But next, the sheriff's office has agreed to provide us with an immediate reaction team so that they can respond to that crisis event and not try to take our officers that are scattered. And so that's it's first of its kind, I think, that I know of in Anoka County to have that element that we never thought we'd have to have before. But we've also done things like put dragon's teeth concrete barriers on the sidewalks to prevent vehicles driving up on the sidewalks. And that's just the start. There's going to be much more when we learn more how to harden our targets, protect people. But those are some of the things we're doing. I can't say how much I appreciate the amount of support that we've got just to hold this, the largest parade in Minnesota. Right? Terrible time of year, but I didn't say that, Mr. West. But that being said, fencing, we've ordered some pedestrian barricades that are delivered, but fencing would be, there's areas which we could use this type of fence for sure.
Comments by members?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
after we had the meeting at Anoka Police Station back when we were talking about this fencing, we bring it back to my council. They explained it to them, they'd like more numbers. We had full agreement that it was needed. Councilmember Wellington Stanton was sitting over there too. There was a couple of things that got brought up with training and stuff, elected officials. Some of it to the aspect, if I understood the verbiage right. After the event and businesses are damaged, having elected officials come in and work with those owners and that type of thing to get that ball going. So you guys can do your business on the other end, the law enforcement part of it. I think would be very great in having training for that for council members, city administrator, those type of people, so that we're all on the same page and nobody's accidentally throwing somebody else under the bus. I think that's a good component to that, to where we're working in unison. But sometimes the elected person gets by a little easier because you don't have that badge on and people talk to you easy. Especially if there was a divide there, just my thoughts.
Good, thanks, Mayor.
If that makes any sense to you.
Anything?
But Mr. Chair, I just want to address the financing part of it, just so everybody's clear, or at least it's transparent on how this would work. If the recommendation from the committee, not recommendation, the one suggestion from the committee was that we would go through the public levy, safety levy through Anoka County to do this. That would require this group to vote for it. It would require the legislature to vote this year, this session, to extend our levy, which, depending on who's elected on November 8th, that may or may not happen easily. And then it would require the county board to actually vote to do the levy. All those are moving targets. And for that reason, I'm glad we're putting this off till our next quarterly meeting. Because we'll likely, well, we will have a new sheriff, we'll have a new county attorney, and we could have up to 5 new county board members. We will have one for sure. So I think it's good that we put this off long enough to have these conversations and understand, make sure that, I think it's got to leave this group with a unanimous vote. Because if it doesn't, you're risking the county board saying no. And that would be rough on law enforcement, on joint law enforcement council relationships. If it leaves this board split and then gets voted down at the county board, that's a splinter that's probably too deep to dig out. So I think we need to consider this thoughtfully and make sure that elected officials are all looped in and that all the public safety people are looped in and that everybody's on the same page before we roll out. And with that, I do appreciate the committee's work. Thank you.
Other comments? Comments? Anyone? Obviously, this is a subject that has been explored. Thank you, Chief, and the committee for all your work on that. Obviously, it's an evolution, not a revolution, right? But keep going because it is a major task. There will be financial ramifications, obviously, to every one of us sitting at the table. And so it has to be well planned out. It will tie into the next item that we're going to talk about here pretty quickly, which is the amended language that will be proposed. But yeah, if it's the body's pleasure, then what I would suggest then is this be put on the January meeting. In the interim, everyone here at least approach your city elected officials and have some discussions about, as the mayor has done, about what are their thoughts on it. I mean, it's obviously a cost benefit analysis. It's a lot of money. There's a 100% chance of spending a lot of money versus 1% chance of having, civil unrest. But along with that, I think one of the things you should mention is what Chief Peterson brought up. It isn't just going to be civil unrest. It could be for other uses in prevention. We all know prevention costs a lot of money, but it's a whole lot easier than trying to cure something that has occurred. Look at Milwaukee and the trial going on right now, where somebody goes through a parade, takes out 68 people, kills them just by driving through. That's not acceptable. So, yes, Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, I think when people have your conversations with elected officials or other staff, whoever you're talking with, it's important to remember that these numbers are really, really baseline. This is just buying 4,300 fence, 4,300 feet. Right. It's not the storage, it's not the transportation, it's not the assembly, the disassembly, the deployment, the monitoring. And I mean, it could easily be this, 1.5 million for the fencing and then $500,000 a year for storage and deployment and other things. It could be more. Again, just make sure when you have the conversation that you get a little bit of an open checkbook in their minds when you talk about
Mr. Chair, we also, I mean, we are not in a hurry there. The ones that need, we got, some of us are in the fence consortium, so we're not in a hurry to do that. And it would be interesting if they ever have to go and use that fence consortium in the future. I don't want anything to happen.
Right.
So I'll knock on wood if you want me to, but I'd be interested to see because right now they're in the process of putting a board together and bylaws together. So I don't believe from being a part of this fence consortium that Hennepin's going to get more, better treatment than Anoka County. So, but I'd like to see something happen to verify that because I think the bylaws are set up and it seems like a fair process that they're setting up with the fence consortium. So we do have time. I think we're paying $8,000 a year, something like that, for that insurance policy for that. So I'm comfortable. You get 1.2 million. We could spend a lot of years for $8,000. So, and it will be, and we will need it at some point. And I continue to remind people that the Hennepin County folks had told us that if it wasn't for State Patrol and Hennepin County Mobile Field Force, Brooklyn Center PD would not be there. They held them off until the fencing got there, and then they were able to relieve the officers. So, and that was very clear from what they were telling us. So, it was, and they needed double fencing there. So, so that's why this is so important for us, I think. So.
Much more to learn, and I suspect it's the wishes of this body to at least put it on for the next agenda and further discussions.
Sounds good.
Fair enough. I think the minutes are. Okay. Let's move on to item number 4H, which is the ad hoc legislative drafting committee report. Chief Danny, if you would please address it, because you were part of that committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the ad hoc legislative drafting committee, we met back on the 17th. In attendance there, we had Chair Schulte, the County Administrator DeGrupin, obviously County Attorney Colombo, and then Chief Swenson, Austin, myself. We met that afternoon at 2 o'clock, and I think we came up with a good plan here.
Attachment G in your packets.
You want to refer to attachment G, that is the existing with the modification, we'll call it, Minnesota Statute 383E.21, and that is the public safety levy statute that we've been having these conversations on. The key outcome of that meeting was making an, not only going forth with trying to extend the levy to 2033, but also adding 18 key words. After subdivision 2, we added an additional subdivision 3 that says any levy issued pursuant to this section shall not be included within the certified levy of the county. So not counting against their overall. This was a key discussion point that I think we were all able to come to an agreement on to certainly address the county's concerns. We did have some other items of discussion as far as, looking at our rules of procedure and making sure we're working collaboratively upfront anyway, and maybe making a modification or addition there, but also working with our local elected officials to educate them. When we originally did the public safety levy, I know, Tony, I think you had a bus that you had to take around for quite a while, but working locally to educate and work with our local elected officials to talk about the process and the procedure, what the proposal would be. And then also looking at in the future, when we do have something that comes forward to Joint Law Enforcement Council, do we have more defined parameters about what really is a Joint Law Enforcement Council project? So with that, we'll open up to other members that were there last week to add anything additional. What were the key takeaways and the recommendation from the ad hoc committee?
Thanks, Chief Danny. Commissioner, any comments you want to make?
I just commented it was a good meeting. I was able to air my concerns. They were heard and addressed, and I think the chiefs that were there and Tony did a good job of putting together this process of going down to the legislature and hopefully getting this extended. But again, it all swings in the balance with what happens 2 weeks from today. We don't know what our legislator is going to look like and whether or not they're going to support extending a public safety levy from a county perspective. They were receptive 10 years ago, and hopefully we can get the same thing done. We would like each city council to weigh in positively with a resolution or some form of affirmation that they're in support of this, because that'll be the first question the legislators ask is, are all cities and is everybody involved in joint law supportive of this? So all the cities that are bearing the brunt of the taxation are they also. So I think work with Tony to figure out how that is best done. I don't know if we decided a resolution is necessary or just a letter signed by the mayor. I'm not sure what we decided, but I think that'll be important when we start knocking on legislators' doors.
As far as process wise, this has been submitted to the Public Safety Committee of the county board for consideration and then moving to if they approve it or recommend referral over to the intergovernmental committee, then it would go to the county board for consideration. So
And for clarity on that, it has to be, in order for this to get into our official legislative platform, it has to go through the committee process, be approved there, and then finally approved by the county board, and then it gets into our legislative platform, which I think is really important if we're going to lobby for this, for it to be in our platform, so we can have everybody see it, not just in writing, but our lobbyists that can work on it.
Okay, Chief Austin, Chief Swets, anything to add?
No, I guess the only thing that I would add is that this is, other than what you see in red, is the change of a date, 18 words. It's the same legislation from 10 years ago. It was a very good legislation. The added text, I think, adds another level of transparency as to who's responsible for this levy, right? In terms of taking ownership of that. I think it's it was a good piece of legislation 10 years ago, and it's a very good piece of legislation now, and it gives this body a funding mechanism when and if there is a project that we can reach wide, if not unanimous, support of. So it's a good piece.
Mr. Chair.
Anything from administration?
Mr. Chair, when are we looking for a resolution from our council? So you'd like that in November meetings, December meetings, or what do you guys prefer?
I would say if we were to have them by the end of the year, that's great.
Okay.
But the county board is going to approve it in November. Well, they'll go through public safety in November and then on to IG in November. So it'll probably be the first meeting in December where the county board actually approves it. And so if the cities come in that timeframe, legislature doesn't get into full action until February. And we won't actually have committee duties, testimony, probably not until even into March.
Okay.
So just the sooner the better, I think, is the message.
So my question is, do we want to have the same resolution language for all of our cities that you want to send out, or do you want us to do our own? What do you prefer?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I can make a suggestion. Perhaps Mayor Bufala and I can work together with our respective councils on some potential language, and then we can kind of queue that up and then circulate that to everybody so that we're all talking off the same sheet of music, if you will. And so I'll get together with Chief Stankey after this and talk to our city manager about getting our city attorney and then seeing if we put that together.
Sure. And I think that's a very good point. I didn't sure I can resonate mine 10 years ago, but
Yeah, if you've got that, shoot it out.
Is it in the back of your bus that you were driving around? Clean it out before you leave.
was it last minutes? No.
All right.
No, Mr. Chair, I was just gonna ask if there was resolution language that was adopted last, if we could potentially just use that for this.
Certainly want to take a look at, I don't know if we got a uniform one or we just took it as we got it, but we certainly have some examples.
Anything would be nice to start.
Any template. Yes, Mayor.
And I would concur, I would ask, maybe for some bullets, as far as where the spending went for the last 10 years or what project was supported. Just to include.
For a whereas.
I'm talking simple 1-page overview, and it would be something my council would place on a consent agenda.
Right.
And get it through in November.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And I will just say as a really high top overview, you can tell them we were allowed by law to levy $8 million. We levied $8 million and we spent it on a public safety data system.
Was it exclusive to that?
It was all inclusive in that.
Okay.
It's a very simplified version, but it is exactly what happens.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, actually, we were just slightly under 8 million, so let's take credit for that.
Less than. And just as a reminder to this body, the original legislation allowed for bonds or capital notes to expend bonds for obviously equipment and capital notes. The county elected, or this body, the judge of the county elected not to go that route. The county fronted the $8 million of this public safety levy has been paying that $8 million. So we never did any sort of borrowings. You know, JLAC obviously borrowed from the county and then they got all paid back. So just for purpose of transparency, that there was never any debt issued for that as such. Don't know if that makes a difference for council or not. So, okay, anything further on that item? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. I guess,
Mr. Chair, Chief Thompson was he
can't do it?
No, he was unable to do it. Yeah, he got tied up, down in Heights on St.
Okay. Do we have a backup?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so the Anoka County Fire Protection Council will be meeting on Thursday. I know that there was a meeting of a subcommittee related to the RMS request for proposals that went out. I would anticipate that would be discussed on Thursday evening. So that I'm up to speed on at this point.
Thank you. Public safety director. Sweats. All right, let's move on to item number 6, user groups, chief law enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our last Chiefs Association meeting was held on the 19th over at Bunker Hills. Our speaker that day was Bernadette Poe from the Director of Mediation and Restorative Services from the county here, and she gave an overview of the programming and some updates there. We did also have some discussion on Halloween parade and some of the measures that are in place. The Office of Traffic Safety had provided some information on grants that are available for cameras on buses. They have about $2.5 million available for that. Sun Communications provided some information on rapid deploy GPS locating systems rolling out. And then probably interestingly, BNSF police were there talking about new opportunities to educate staff on how to stop a train. There's not a recent. So for all the municipalities in here that have train tracks on, they may want to consider that.
Just to expand on that a little bit, what happens, a mentally ill person jumped the train and threw the engineer off. The engineer jumped off, so this person was running the train for about 200 miles.
Sock Rapids, was it, I believe? Yeah.
So we'll be about. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, by the way.
I think we've all trained on crossing safety and things like that, but I don't know how many have actually trained on getting in the cab
and doing it.
Stop running train. So, yeah. So.
Maneuvers do not work.
Adapt, we have to adapt.
And a more serious, to recall, I'm sure many of the chiefs can recall that, how many trains do we have coming through Anoka County every day?
82 lots.
82 trains that come through Anoka County. How many of those carry crude from North Dakota? Do you know?
It obviously changes. It's ramping back up again, but at its peak, it was 71 of the 82 trains were oil. Now, in its lowest point, it was down to about 4, and now it's back up in the 30s.
Okay. And Terry, I'm sure you can weigh in on this, because if there's a derailment and with the North Dakota crude, it takes approximately, about 6 hours to put out a fire like that, and we have approximately 15 minutes worth of retardant.
Mr. Chair, or more. Depends on a lot of factors. How big is the train? And the last fire life safety meeting I was at for commuter rail, they're doubling up on the trains. So we're talking about miles long trains. So it's how much is crushed and how much, so it could be 5 hours, could be 10 hours, could be weeks. We've seen in different, derailments in Canada, and other places, likely in Fridley, we get corn.
Yeah.
So there's opportunity for wildlife, but yeah, Mr. Chair, there's a lot of variables. But the biggest thing with that is if it's gonna take time to put out, is it could be burning for a while? Are we doing evacuations? There's all these spider webs that grow off of that, so there's complications. But regardless, our actions will be needed to support that rail line if there is an event, either with commuter rail Amtrak or North Star or crude or other commodities. There's more than just crude that are on those consists. There's a lot of hazmat beyond that, like chlorine and other things that are way worse. And I'll add it as part of my update. But tonight, if you can't sleep and at 6 o'clock, you want to show up at Anoka PD, there's a surface transportation, emergency preparedness and security, Homeland Security steps course from 6 until 10-ish. It'll be less than that. But basically, it's an awareness about trains and the very things we're just talking about. So we have many openings, but if you want to be there at 8 o'clock at Anoka PD, thanks for Anoka. So there was a morning session this morning, and now there's an evening from 1800 on. But there's all sorts of programming and so forth that we could be accessing through our federal funds for the very things we've been talking about. So.
I have to remind this body of potential dangerousness of something. Something goes wrong, it's gonna go wrong big. And of course, all our people are gonna be called to respond first. Now, what they gotta be prepared, especially if it's chlorine, right? You're gonna get people protected when they respond to something. Knock on wood, but we never thought we'd have to put up fencing around public buildings either. So anyway, I just want to put that out. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to criminal investigations.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thanks. We just have a couple updates. This Saturday from 10 to 2 in partnership with the DEA, we're going to be hosting a drug take back. This is our semi-annual event that's usually fairly successful. And then another note is the DTF is short 3 detectives. Our officers are having to go back to their home agencies due to staffing shortages, so we're 3 short in the drug task force. The task force is also saying goodbye to the National Guard analyst, Tricia Vadness, who is promoted and sent on assignment to serve on the Southwest United States border. So some updates from CID.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Ben? What? Right.
Here, if I could just make a quick comment, just on the prescription drug take-back program. We implemented that working with you. Many of us have shared boxes around the county that we continue to collect. To date, mostly for the elected officials, I think law enforcement is aware, but we've taken over 10 tons of prescription drugs off the streets of Anoka County that we're keeping out of the mouths of the babes, so to speak. So not raiding medicine cabinets or whatever else. So hopefully we're doing something good to help keep the streets a little bit cleaner.
I'd just like to add to that, another thing that is a benefit to doing that is it's not going into landfills.
Exactly.
And those chemicals leaching into our water supply, we cannot pull those back out. So I think there's a kind of a twofold. One is for people who aren't supposed to be having them, but also the environment.
Absolutely.
For how long a period of time has that been? 3 years, 4 years?
No, it's been, oh my goodness, I was gonna guess 7 or 8, so yeah, probably 10.
10 tons.
Time flies when you're having fun.
10 tons.
That's a lot of water. I mean, I just think that environmental aspect of it is kind of not on everyone's radar, but that is long-term, such a huge
Extremely
benefit.
important.
Yeah, I think it actually would be, if there's any way like on social media to sort of share that, but I think that, 10 tons is a big number, but then the families that are being protected and then the environment, it might help motivate more people to do it when they think, well, I don't have children, I'll just throw them away.
Right.
That they're not worried about that ingesting aspect, but.
A lot of the seniors were always told, just flush them down the toilet. I mean, they were, that's how.
Yeah, that's what
we
they are.
were. I grew up at my age.
If it's expired, just flush it down the
Flush
toilet.
it down the
but-
toilet, and then we find out it gets into the water and you can't get rid of it.
So this is a really. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Education, training, firearms.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, one important note is Kelly Wellman has moved to the administrative assistant down in the patrol division. So she's starting to transfer responsibility to Ashley Johnson, who used to be with our criminal investigation division administration. So we're kind of stealing and moving people around. So Ashley will be the new contact. But as we finish out this year, the main contact will continue to be Kelly Wellman, and you'll get notifications from her specifically. We've got a night and adverse weather shoot coming up here in mid-November. Kelly Wellman should have an email sent out shortly regarding the opportunities to sign up for that. And then another great training opportunity coming up in the first part of 2023, January. We're hosting a NTOA supervisory patrol critical incidents. This class is not intended for SWAT operators, but intended for primary patrol officers with no SWAT experience and to help them manage critical incidents prior to the arrival of SWAT. So a unique training opportunity. It's a 2-day course. If you're interested in sending any officers there, please contact Kelly Bowman.
Okay, now, Commander, questions, anything? Let's move on, emergency management, Terry.
I go back to that class that's tonight. It's a good class. I actually was on site in Pueblo, Colorado for one of their other courses. But it's a federal level course if we plan on attending or have officers that are going to be. For emergency management, going back to my yes or no answer that I gave you earlier, Mr. Chair. One of the things that we work on every 5 years, and some of the chiefs in the room will cringe when I say hazard mitigation plan. It's coming due again, and we actually do a vulnerability assessment. Back 5 years ago plus, civil unrest was not higher on our numbers, nor was it disease-based thing, so it will be now. And we'll be looking at our federal partners and state partners to see if we have eligible projects. So I think we're very much talking about short-term, medium-term, long-term may become opportunities with that hazard mitigation plan. Typically, when we have a disaster in Minnesota, we get millions of dollars in to look at prevention. What are those things we can do to mitigate? And if it's in our plan at the city level, the county level, approved by the state and the federal region 5 out in Chicago, then it comes back to us. We have the elected officials weigh in saying, yep, this is the plan. It becomes opportunities for these local jurisdictions. One of the examples I give is small, medium, large sheltering, so storm shelters. That was an addendum we did a number of years ago that re-triggered availability, because if you have a mobile home park and other locations, a school, it becomes a funding opportunity. I know there's a lot of different cities that have applied, and it's just a good opportunity. So I bring that up. So the answer, yes, no, time will tell. But all we have to do is put it in our plan, see if it becomes an eligibility to be able to utilize that when we do it. Like I said, our vulnerability assessment, certainly civil unrest is one of the top ones. For my department, I'm in the middle. I actually have interviews tomorrow and Friday for an opening. I'm actually adding a deputy director so I can divide and conquer for some of these meetings. So we can continue our good work in the communities and be in a couple different places at one time. But we'll always participate in these short-term, long-term planning charrettes because it's very much impactful. We have those relationships with those state and federal agencies. Mike Christensen, saw him up in St. Cloud this morning. We talked about what handovers they're bringing in that federal partner to do some assessments. The same applies for all of our communities. We can do that for the Halloween parade. I'm sure you may have already talked to Mike Christensen and others from Department of Homeland Security. But we'll continue working down that path, making the county safe.
All right, thank you. Terry, any questions? Anybody have questions about that? All right, appreciate it. Thank you. Auto theft task force, chief.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Lieutenant reported to me that we're putting together end of the quarter from this last quarter after September, our numbers. We are doing our standard audit in January by the state. And it is prevention season. Will try and get, if people need something, this is where they warm up their cars and go back in and start their breakfast, and then the car is gone. So this is probably our worst season now as people start warming up. So try and get prevention out there. We'll try and get stuff to your staff, to get your communication staff to get prevention out, take your keys out, don't warm up the car, et cetera. And remember, you can't go into the gas station with your fob in your pocket. People could steal your car. And so all those good things. And then lastly, we are going to be moving forward in Fridley. Well, I'm going to attempt to move forward with a catalytic converter ordinance as far as possession and selling. I did have some, we're putting numbers together, and when I do get the numbers, I'll certainly share them with the Cleos. The sheriff and I were on a region meeting a couple weeks ago, and I talked to the chiefs of police lobbyists and asked them if the state was interested in doing anything with the catalytic converters. He did not believe that was going to be happening. His recommendation to us as Cleos was to start enacting them in every city. And so as we continue to enact them, it'll put a little pressure on the state to do something as a whole. So I took Shakopee's catalytic converter ordinance. I've run it by some people. Commissioner Schulte looked through it with his background. He gave me some feedback on it. I have to work on our city prosecutor a little bit. You know, those prosecutors can be,
Animated.
chair. Can you talk?
Oh, yeah.
I gotta get them squared away a little bit on that. But, once I get that, I'm gonna be presenting the numbers to our council and trying, to get that, going for our city. And all the Cleos should have that if they're interested in doing it, but we are gonna do it. I did talk to the Shakopee chief last week. They have charged 3 people in the last year with, the catalytic converter, ordinance, so. We're trying to do something for our communities about this issue that was going on, so that's the report for all of them.
Chief, any questions, Chief?
Just a brief one.
Yes.
What's the offense and penalties for that?
It's a misdemeanor. If they're, if we charge them with a misdemeanor, then it's up to the city prosecutor and the judges to enforce, fines and jails.
Unfortunately for ordinances, the cities are left with only setting things at a misdemeanor, and the state has to set them higher than that. So we're kind of limited at that. My only concern about this is it seems like it calls for a bigger penalty because it's such a big problem. And so,
right,
but this is a good start.
And what's also, if they have 10 catalytic converters, though, it's probably a felony level
Get aggregated.
theft. It could be aggregated too, so then it would maybe be up to the county level. This is something new we're kind of digging into, so it just doesn't seem right that somebody, and that's the conversations I've had with salvage yards and that type of thing, for somebody to have 10 catalytic converters in the back of their pickup truck with no reason why. Even if you have a junk car, you should have some type of paperwork that I bought this junk car from somebody. That's why I have the catalytic converter. They will buy Priuses for $1,000 just for their catalytic converter.
Really?
Because it's worth so much. And so, so we're just trying to do something. We want, to bring as much of that light to the community that we're trying to do everything to try and help people with this problem. It's $2,500 if you lose a catalytic converter. That's what I was told.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would say Chief Workey's done a lot of work on this, and if other cities and other chiefs are interested in this, and there's enough interest, maybe we need to talk about a countywide ordinance to make it easier on all the smaller departments. And I mean, I don't know if the county board would have an appetite for it, but to me, it seemed like countywide would make it simpler. I don't know if that's harder in the county attorney's office, or I'm not sure. I don't know any of the details. I'm just thinking, it's good for Fridley, maybe good for Coon Rapids, maybe good for Andover and points beyond. But again, I want the chiefs and their city councils to talk about that long before the county would ever weigh in. Just a thought that if we're trying to get it statewide, maybe a countywide ordinance would make a headline to push some state legislators to contemplate.
Thank you. Any other comments on that? Sure. Thank you. Okay, let's move to item number 7. We'll go around the room, elected officials input. Mayor Summers.
None for me today.
None, thank you.
All right, keep going, Mayor.
Well, I'll just add that I like hearing what Fridley's doing and the idea of Anoka County having and we'll talk about it some more, but I know it's not just the money, I have friends that have had it happen and there's damage to the car and they're out of the car and, it's a big thing and it's hitting so many different people. So, yeah, thank you for your work on that.
Thank you, Mayor. So let's keep going, Mayor.
Well, again, thanks for all the good work you guys do. I always enjoy coming here and doing this, and I wish you the best, sir, in your endeavors. You've been a great pleasure to work with for the whole time. So, my hats off to you, and you enjoy your next chapter. If anybody else is retiring, I do know that thought.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we'll go to the screen, Mayor Philbin.
None at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilman West. Brian? Apparently, we don't have any on there. Councilwoman Chelsea Howell, any comments?
I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
I'm unmuted, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Technology, I'm from Anoka. Thanks to everybody on the in the county that is helping out with the Halloween festivities this weekend coming up. I know Chief Peterson does a tremendous job of utilizing the assets within the county, and we appreciate that, and I'll support that our neighboring communities give us also. Anti-Crime Commission had a great meeting yesterday It's our annual fundraising breakfast. I think we raised somewhere over $25,000. The key to that, folks, is if your community is looking for something to partner with your law enforcement organization, you should take some time and talk to myself, Chair of our Anti-Crime Commission, Mike Scott, or Chief Peterson. It's something that I think really benefits the community as a whole. Thank you. And Tony, thank you for all the work that you've done. Don't spend too much time in Florida.
Thank you, Councilman. Back to the live room, Commissioner.
Thank you, Tony. I've consumed too much air here already, so I won't talk long. Other than to say that I've heard there's an election coming up. I wish everybody that's in that election luck, and hope that our counties and municipalities all turn out better because of it. And I would also like to express my thanks to the sheriff and to the county attorney for their work on this council, not just what they did every day, but on this council, and to make it a success over these at least last 10 years for sure. I guess I've actually done it for like 14 or 15 years because I've done it with the city council. Thank you. Thanks for your work and your service, and I'm confident it'll move forward in good stead.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Let's give it Councilman Hosmer.
Yeah, City of Fridley, we swore in 2 additional officers, and now we are back at 100% strength for our police, so that's good news. And last Saturday night, we held our annual pumpkin night in the park at Springbrook, and we had between staff and attendees and support over 5,000 people there, and 0 issues whatsoever, and everybody had a good time.
That was good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilman Johnson.
Nothing for the good of the order, but I would also like to thank and express my appreciation to both Jim Stewart as being our sheriff. Always appreciated our interactions with the Rapid City Council and even before that. And you, Tony, as county attorney, for your service to this county and also on this board. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay. Thank you. We'll move along. Any old business? Anybody want to bring something up previous times? New business. We only have one item, item H. As you know, we have an insurance policy on our equipment facilities safety data system. Fortunately, they've increased the rates this year, but our equipment is up a little bit, right? The value of our equipment, George, that's why they increased the rate.
Sure.
Not in the affirmative, as they say. So we have to have approval because of expenditure of money. So do I have a motion to approve the bill from insurance? Okay, motion by Mayor Sodge, second. Second by Mayor Buchla. Okay, any discussion? Yes.
Did I read it right that it now has some cyber security insurance that we didn't have before? I think I saw that they added that because it comes
Yes.
through the insurance trust.
Yes, first party cyber it's called, yes.
Yeah, and that wasn't there before, so
It was not.
that's probably worth the addition just there alone. However, when I read it, as I read through it, I thought, why do we even pay this? We're never gonna collect on that policy. Our equipment's gonna fail because of age, not because of breakdown. If it fails because of breakdown, they're gonna say it's not covered anyways. So I feel like this is really a ridiculous policy, but I'm gonna vote in favor of it.
Okay. Other comments?
We have this money in our budget, so it's really not, you guys have already voted to approve it, and I have extra funds to pay any over, so I think we're already paying that, just for the council.
Okay. Very good. All right, motion second, any further discussion? Fortunately, I gotta do a roll call vote, so right here at the end, we're gonna go right down the line. John Swenson.
Yes.
James Stewart.
Aye.
Jeff Caters.
Yes.
Brian Padani.
Yep.
Josh Antoine.
Yes.
Lee Austin.
Yes.
Sherry Buchla.
Yes.
Let's keep going. Steve Feldman.
Yes.
Chelsea Howell.
Yes.
Brad Johnson.
Yes.
Amanda Marquez.
Yes.
Robert Nelson.
Yes.
Dave Oswald.
Yes.
Tim Sanders.
Yes.
Scott Schulte.
Aye.
Brian West.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you get James Moore?
He votes yes.
He votes yes, sorry.
And your.
Eric Peterson, yeah, sorry about that.
That's right.
Both votes yes. Well,
Yes.
all right, motion passed. We can pay the bill now. Anything else for Good. You know, I will make some comments. Obviously, it's my last meeting and I want to extend my gratitude to this body. It has been an absolute pleasure working. I really mean that. It is, you guys have been exceptionally professional and you have provided exceptional services to the citizens of Anoka County. I know people have come and gone from this board, but every person that's been on this board has rendered that service. Including elected officials and our law enforcement officials. I'm sure the sheriff and I would agree. I've been very proud to be associated with this board. You guys have done just the utmost job in securing, I think, the good for the citizens of Anoka County. I expect that this board's work, the excellent work that you guys have done will continue in the future. I firmly hope so. And I know with the leadership that's sitting around this table, that clearly will happen. Thank you really for all your service. Sheriff, it's your last meeting. Would you like to make any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sure would. I would echo what you said. It's been a unique opportunity to not just learn along the way over the past few decades and see what's been put in place that we all inherited. This is truly a model of excellence, not just for the region and for the state, but even at the national level. You just don't see this type of cooperation, this type of collaboration. And I go to other parts and maybe others see it too. And when I say, yeah, I get along great with all my police chiefs and our fire counterparts, and some of those other parts of the state, their own detectives don't get along with their patrol deputies. So it's this degree of partnership and collaboration truly is unique. It's been my honor, my absolute privilege to be part of the Joint Law Enforcement Council, and I'm excited to see it continue to get better and better. And for those that might be interested, you are all more than invited to the Empire Room in Anoka the evening of January 3rd for a very laid-back, cold one. Love to have you stop by and join us. Other than that, thank you so much for the privilege of being able to serve with each other. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sheriff. Is there anyone else here at the table? It is their last meeting? I don't know, but I'm chosen not to run again.
I mean, depending on the election.
Yeah. Plans at this time out there.
I'm unopposed. You're stuck with me.
Anything else coming for the body? See nothing. Thank you. Declare us adjourned. Good morning.
Bye.
Yeah.